I'd like to call the meeting to order for the Capital Committee for February 8th. I want to note the meeting's being recorded. The first item on our agenda is a review of C Street bid status for the Sewer Enterprise Fund. David, you talking on that a little bit? Yeah. Just come on up.
Morning, everybody.
Morning, David. If you could just go through what you're looking for and just give us a little presentation on this.
The C Street bids were open last week, and they came in. Base bid came in just under the appropriation. However, base bid plus alternates puts us a bit over, just about $500,000 over. Some of the alternates that we're looking for was the flood protection wall, pretty critical part of the project. The lining of all the wet well and all the areas that are exposed to any of the hydrogen sulfide gas. That was a bid alternate 2, and bid alternate 3 was just some security stuff and cameras and et cetera like that. So we're just about, for base bid plus all alts, including the 5% contingency required by the state. We're about $519,000 over budget. So it's just a matter of what our next steps are, and we're working diligently with Brian and everyone downtown to see where we can come up with a shortfall. So we're gonna extend our greetings out to the bidders to see if they'll carry their bids over for an extra 30 days, which will cover us to beyond town meeting. So by town meeting, then we'll have some kind of an answer. They're going to extend that greeting today, so I haven't heard anything as of yet. That's about where we are as far as C Street goes right now. Okay. So it was the estimators for the project were within 3.5% of their estimate, so it was pretty impressive. They hit the ball this time pretty good. So, but some of the alternates did push us over.
Yeah, Jim.
So I know you reported to the Board of Selectmen about this project, yes, and your expectation about it being where it might be within the budget. Can you just kind of refresh my memory on that? Because I had a different kind of perspective.
It was. We were taking, and we're also got something coming up for the Selectmen here shortly. One of the meetings coming up, and if we could actually award the bid today without any of the alternates. However, we would have to come back at a future time, a different project, probably rebid the alternates. We can do the project as is without the alternates, except it'll cost more to redrain the wet well and everything else in the future. So
yeah, and that was kind of my recollection that you were pretty confident it was going to come in under budget, which it did.
It did.
And then I know we asked the question, is it okay if we? And maybe I got the projects mixed up.
I know a shimmer one was the one that I said I'd get on the board if we came in over budget.
Oh, okay.
Well, but it might have also been the Surfside upgrades.
And the Surfside upgrades.
Oh, okay. So I'm sorry. So I was mistaken. All right. Okay, good.
Surfside is as critical as a pump station as that is. I think the engineering firm did an outstanding job.
Okay, so I was on the wrong side. Okay, good. Thanks.
Yeah. That's okay. But, so that's the story on C Street. This is all very fluid and moving quite fast. So we're trying to get everything into order here, and if the bidders will extend their bids and carry them over for 30 days, we'd be beyond town meeting, and we'd have a definite answer then as to what was, if we can get the extra funding, not get the extra funding, just go forward with the base bids. So.
Libby?
I was just going to comment that we are going to the Selectmen with a brief update about this project either next week or the week after. Can't remember. We just talked about with the engineers yesterday, as well as the Surfside upgrade project. But as far as C Street goes and the additional funds, we do have money available in retained earnings for the Sewer Enterprise Fund that would require an appropriation at this town meeting, and that could be worked into the Finance Committee motion to the Enterprise Fund capital article. So that's what we're looking at to make up the shortfall.
Peter?
And I would say, David, that we just not to have you describe to everyone, if we need to be reminded, what the C Street Station does, one. And two, with the recent changes in regulations relevant to floodplain, not that the floodplain is recent, it's about a year, but from an electrical standpoint, to put a gen set on the ground today, it's not as easy as it used to be. You have to go at least 2 foot above the floodplain with a vault, and then go above that with a gen set, so you just buy a cast concrete structure, because yours is probably 15 by 18.
Yeah, that's one of the
That's
driving
a big thing.
factors is the excess amount of concrete, not only for the gen set, but for the transformer alone. That has to be raised over 4 feet in a giant concrete vault and filled with stone and everything else. And then the vault, the transformer goes on top of that. So the concrete prices have pushed up just because of the new rolling a year ago. Currently, the floor level at C Street is flood elevation 5. The new guidelines is elevation 9. So we're already 4 feet below where we're supposed to be. That station handles at least up to 80% of the entire island's flows, from Monomoy to the schools to Hubbard Avenue. That is the primary pump station. It will do in excess of over 2 million gallons a day by itself, on top of the other pump stations. If that station was to fail, I care not to describe what could happen.
I mean, that affects the majority of the island.
It pretty much would shut down downtown there.
You say genset, is it generator?
Generator.
Yeah, standby generator. We're required by law to have generators that can run at least 24 hours minimum standby time. This generator that will be replacing the one that's in there now currently was put in 1987. Has very low hours on it. However, it's a 2-cycle diesel, which are no longer allowed by EPA standards. So the new generator we're going to be putting will meet the current up-to-date standards. Actually, we only have to go to Tier 3. We do not have to go to Tier 4 now, just because of it's considered an emergency use only generator. So that's going to save us a little money on the gen set, but
On operating costs.
the concrete is.
Are they going to, the installer, would they actually give you the maintenance for a couple of
We will be taking and going with a maintenance program for 3 years. We're doing all of our generators.
Good.
That's another requirement we have to have.
Good.
So we have to have logs of what was serviced and everything like that.
And the hours that it runs is all,
Yeah, if a generator runs over excess of 100 hours a year, it falls into a different category. And luckily, even with the amount of times we run our generators, we always fall underneath that. So,
good.
but that's the C Street.
All right. Considering the importance of this station, is there any other improvements that we can make? Are we working with something that someone installed years ago and we're just sort of doing what we need to do to it? Or should we be considering some other option, maybe on that same site, but something that's updated, that is a better improved system? I mean, are we fighting sort of the tides?
No, I see what you're saying. What we're planning on doing is we're doing a complete gut of the station. Absolutely, everything's coming out. There'll be all new electronics, electric services, all new wiring. The wet wells are going to be all reconstructed, lined. Currently, the station is a triplex station. We have 3 pumps there currently. We have 2 primaries in the standby. We're going to a 4-pump system. We're going to have 3 primaries and a true actual standby pump. We're going to be incorporating the station so that we can alternate the force mains, because a force main that sits stagnant for too long creates a lot of hydrogen sulfide gas, which is extremely corrosive, and we don't want to end up where Plymouth ended up with their force mains rupturing. So this station will be state-of-the-art, 21st century technology. The pumps that we're installing in the pump room are going to be called dry pit submersibles. They are designed to actually be submersible pumps to 65 feet. And all the electronics are going to be up above flood level 9 upstairs, so there'll be no disconnects, no electrical connections except at the pump in the basement. Everything's going to be up and outside the flood level. And the pumps are going to be designed, they could run underwater for forever. They're designed that way. So this will be, it'll give us backup pumps, redundancy. Everything that we're doing there is going to be redundant as far as valving goes and switching, and
Okay.
so it's going to be done right the first time. So
Yeah, Jim?
That's a question for Libby. So this, have two questions. This came not through the regular capital program committee,
C
capital
Street.
project committee.
C Street did.
Let me finish. So this addition, this didn't come through this is coming from you today.
Oh, today.
And then,
This,
and then
Go
my
ahead.
second question is, are you looking for a recommendation to finance committee for this?
at David's budget review with the finance committee, this project came up and they asked us to come back to the capital program committee and
Okay.
review it with you. I don't
Okay.
think we're looking for any kind of vote from you.
Okay, that's what I was
Maybe a
asking.
consensus that we're on the right track would be helpful, but
Or
no
maybe a
action.
vote. I mean,
Or a vote to support
yeah,
wouldn't be bad.
okay. I just wondered.
So this is like a week and a half old, so this
No,
did not.
I know, I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
was trying to understand what your expectation was. Because I certainly support this.
Yeah, Peter?
Just curious, so bid alternative 1, 2, and 3, are those, like, if you want bid alternative 2, you also have to pay for bid alternative 1, if you want 3, you have to pay for 2 or 1? Or is
No,
it,
you
can you
can-
choose any of them and it just costs the difference between, I just don't see a
We
breakdown.
can choose different differences, you don't have to actually take, and, you know, we can do bid alternate 2, which is the lining of all the wet wells and the inside interior of the wet areas.
Right, yep.
Which would be okay. It still puts us a little over budget, like I think it's $139 or $140-something thousand over budget. The big budget ticket was that flood wall, which is just, I think it was just under $300,000, but it's also 18 inches of solid concrete
Right.
poured around the whole structure.
That was kind of what I was curious about, because I mean, it seems like you have some financial benefits of doing the epoxy lining now, as you said in the write-up, as opposed to having to later drain the tank and go offline, and so, you know, it seems like you might save some money in that respect. The flood wall, is that something that could be done retroactively, you know?
It probably
future-
could be done retroactively, however, with the work that we're doing in the back of the building,
Yeah.
it will be part of that integral system that's gonna be there now.
Right.
It's pretty critical. We have had, as of early as the last winter, we had water at the front door from the flooding. And if it had got in last year, we weren't gonna be in the same situation we are now with the pumping. But it gives that, it's also gonna give that building the extra structural support, because when you get all the flood waters around it,
Pressure.
the pressure on the inside of the, once it floods, it'll be fine, because it'll batch itself. There are some concerns as far as that goes.
Right, and so there are some timing benefits of doing it now as opposed to, you know, down the road, a year or 2 or 3, or.
Definitely, I believe, would cost less to do it now than down the line. And the engineers, the way they've explained a lot of the different options and stuff, that it's just, I mean, it makes sense to do it.
Yeah.
I would say go forward with it. It's just a matter of, we are over our budget.
And when was the last time that that there was flooding that this would have mitigated? They got in there and required to clean up.
The
and then-
no-name storm in 1991, the basement flooded to the ceiling.
Right.
There was 25, 20, 30 feet of water in the basement, where they had to completely go in and redo all the electronics. So that was 91 was the latest.
And so those are the big costs that you'd be trying to avoid.
That's what we're trying to avoid. And now we actually we actually go down to sandbag. You can see the sandbags from the yacht club. I know that when we stack them all around the whole building. Helps, doesn't stop it, but
Yeah.
if we were to have a flood like 91 now, the current generator's intake would be underwater.
Okay, thank you.
Who serviced those, who serviced those pumps? Did we get those serviced?
We do all the pump service ourselves in-house. Unless we need to take and send them off for rebuilding or something like that, then we'll send them off to a pump manufacturer. They'll bring them back to tolerances and ship them back to us. But we do all of our own pump service.
Is someone certified to do that? Is that,
All of our guys are cross-trained in both, and when it comes to anything that requires manufacturer specifications, the manufacturer can actually send us an assistant, a technician out to help us. We've had to do that in the past. But most of the stuff as far as changing in colors or removing shims, get the tolerances in level, we do it ourselves.
that's worked out pretty good?
It has worked out very good.
Were these afterthoughts, or was this,
No, this was all part of the original bid.
Okay.
It's just, and the concrete is what's pushing us
Got it.
that extra level because of the amount of, the new regulations are having to raise that gen set and then have a fuel tank under the gen set and strap it. That's just, what's just pushing these back.
Okay.
Pretty close though, I gotta say, the engineering firm was pretty good,
Yeah.
3.5% or whatever, their estimate.
All right, so, What would you guys need? Just a sense, or Libby?
I'd be happy to make a motion that we support this.
Sure. Okay. Is there a motion to support? Is there a second?
Second.
A second. All in favor?
Aye.
Appreciate it.
I just know this has been a topic of the conversations at the Board of Selectmen meeting,
Yeah.
and it would just be nice to get it all done. So,
Done it once.
yeah.
It's a very critical station.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Excuse me. Next item on the agenda is review on comment water company's new building request. Bob, Heidi, if you guys want to come up. David, is this you?
That's me, the jacket.
Morning.
Good morning.
Do you have to talk into these?
No.
It can help.
I mean, it'll pick it up.
I got it.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for putting us on the agenda this morning. I understand this is a little unusual in far as the timing goes, but we're here this morning to ask you to consider funding our additional capital request for our office building. This building was approved by the voters at the 2015 annual town meeting after being reviewed by this committee and the FinCom with an appropriation of $3.5 million. Once we had that appropriation, went to work, and utilizing the town's procurement officer, went through that whole procurement process and got an architect and an OPM. And with that and the Wanacoma staff, our team, we put together the design of a building that we expect to service for 50 years. We also enlisted the town's energy advisor, Lauren Sinatra, and had numerous meetings with her and National Grid to try to get some rebates on light bulbs, that sort of thing. Energy efficient, the design has a solar tube in the roof to get natural light into the building. So those kinds of things. The IT department's critical. You know, everyone lives on computers today, and getting the fiber optic into the property, which it is, and was a big part of this program, and how it would come into the building and how the server would fit in there. So after numerous meetings, and we've expended about $275,000 so far out of 3.5 to get to this point, we came up with a plan that we felt would serve us and the ratepayer and the customers well. That plan went to HDC and was approved, the hardscape's been approved, and the demolition of the existing buildings all has HDC approval. In the meantime, we're progressing down a path of stick build. Did the design, sent it out to construction estimators, had a hazmat, had to do a hazardous materials survey of the existing building, figure into the demolition costs. The contractors that came for a site visit to look at the site said, "You're gonna have that or we won't take it down." So we did that. We have that. We got a hazardous material consultant in, and it's about a $200,000 remediation when you take the old building down. So with given the construction estimate and using a Nantucket factor, and depending on how the basement went, we had a spread of about $4.7 million to $5.5 million in construction estimate, keyword estimate. Too much. So went back and looked at a modular construction. Modular is not really the word, that's the state word under Chapter 149, Section 44E is modular construction, but it's really panelized. So we put together an RFP to get panelized quotes. And the difference really is that in building the panels off island, you only have to pay prevailing wage for people that are on site. You know, that's a small thing, but it can, when you're starting dealing with a lot of subs, it can So we said, okay, we're gonna take the panelized approach. We asked the architects to shift gears a little bit and design and change the building so that it could go into an RFP and a modular person. It didn't change the program, it didn't change very much at all, but it just tweaked it so that they could bid on that. And they did. We had two proposals, Delbrook Scanlon and Triumph. And we evaluated both, going through the RFP evaluation process. Both of them were more than capable. Scanlon came out a little bit in our evaluation. After that was done, the prices were open, and Scanlon was, fortunately, he was the lowest price. So now we had a firm price. We had Scanlon came in. We met with them. We talked about their approach to the project to make sure the bases were covered. We talked about the site work. We just went through the whole project. And at the end of that, we knew that we still had a funding shortfall. And Scanlon said, look, you try to get you work on getting the extra funding. We'll hold our price till town meeting, till the funding issue is resolved. That's huge. They don't have to do that. Legally, after 30 or 40 days, it's different for modular, but they don't have to hold the price. So, but they did agree to do that. So we went back to the commission and said we need $1.5 million to complete this project. We have $2.63 million in certified retained earnings, our savings account, that has built up. And so we'd like to take $1.5 million from that account to fund this project and complete it, get it done. The commission agreed to that, and we're here today. We thought, because you had already submitted your proposal to the FinCom, that's why we brought this up at our FinCom budget meeting, because we didn't have numbers. We wanted to have numbers. No more, every building project on Nantucket seems to operate on guesstimates or construction estimates. Then the bid comes in and whoa, everyone's surprised. We didn't want to go down that road. We wanted to come with real numbers. We have real numbers right now. And so that is the reason that we're here today. We have a funding source. We have a building that's going to meet our needs for 50 years, we believe. Well serve this community and the ratepayer. And we have the funding available to do that. So we think it's an appropriate use, and we've more than done our homework on this. We have, I can't tell you, a meeting a week looking at ways to tweak the building. We started out with a full basement. Now we're down to a 325 square foot basement that is basically for a mechanical room. So that's why we're here today. We thank you for the time.
At any point, I know you said there's no change to the ratepayer. At any time, will this project have an impact on the ratepayer, whether it's now or like in 2 years?
I don't think you can definitively answer and say yes it will or no it won't. There are a lot of factors that go into the rate. We have a whole other 10-year capital program that's been vetted by this committee, and that's $15 million. We have Washington Pond Tank is a big part of that by 2026. Regulatory changes. Met last week with DEP to review those. Are they going to have some budgetary impact? Certainly. But when you look at debt reduction and other budgetary factors, I think I can honestly say that we haven't had a rate increase for 3 years. Probably sometime within the next 3 years there will be a rate increase. But is it directly attributable to this building? No, because we've already figured into our rate the debt service on the 3.5 million. So it's coming out, and this coming out of certified retained earnings. It's not an immediate attributable impact on the rate for this project.
Was there any, to consider the modular or the panelized, was there any other comment from the state as far as like the regulations on building that? As far as, I mean, I know there's a lot that goes into things you have to comply with.
Right.
And is there something that we're missing with that by going the panelized version? If
Well,
we,
in October, the regulations changed. The state regulation changed on modular panelized construction. Because up till then, the quote-unquote Butler buildings, that kind of building was exempt from procurement. It was exempt from Chapter 149. And that's how the Vineyard built their fire station that cheap. But that changed in October. So we look at the regulations for Chapter 149, 44E, which is modular construction. The state has different regulations for modular that allows you to build panels off-site without having to pay prevailing wage. And that can be a huge, depending, I mean, it was sufficient enough that Triumph, which was the other bidder or proposer, was going to build their panels in Pennsylvania. And they were going to ship them to New Bedford and put them on a barge and bring them here. And their price was only a couple of $100,000 more than Delbrook Scanlon, who was going to be building the panels on the Cape and bringing them here. So it's significant savings in the whole process if your project can make that work. And quite honestly, we never gave it a thought. I think of modular as Huntington Homes 13-foot boxes, but that was my ignorance. But our OPM, John Lemieux from Vertec, has had experience with this type of modular building, panelized building, and they said we really ought to take a look at this. So we did.
wait, who said that? Who was, you said someone had experience with this?
John Lemieux, who's our owner of OPM, he's the town's OPM, and we were able to utilize his services.
I didn't know Del Scanlon got into modular. Is that something that they're experienced with?
We had a long discussion about their experience with that. Delbrook, which bought Scanlon, they really are kind of they do it all. I mean, they have experience, and we asked for modular projects that they constructed in Massachusetts in the last 5 years, and they gave us a list of those.
Is there any change in the process of the OPM due to this type of construction?
No.
Represents-
It was, we had to amend the architect's contract a little bit to have them switch gears and put it into a modular format, but, no. The other, issue with this is we're gonna significantly increase the safety factor of going into one. Right now, you've all been to Wanacoma, you go out the back, kind of around like this. Verizon has their little easement in place right there. It gets a little crazy in the summer. We got guys going back and forth to the shop. It gets a little confusing. So now with the building moved back, we're gonna straighten that egress out particularly. So you're gonna have much better sight lines. And it's gonna make a pretty significant difference safety-wise, I believe. So,
have you been open to listening to the options of the office being across the street at Two Fairgrounds? Or any thoughts on that? As opposed to the advantages of it being where it is, and how that change would affect, or if there's any improvements with that?
Sure, we looked at that when we met with, I can't remember their name now,
LLB.
Pardon me?
LLB.
LLB was the town's consultant, and we provided them with the program that we had developed with our architect, and that program was developed by interviewing every employee. Every employee at Wanacom got a stake in this project, and they took that, LLB did, and we met with them to discuss how we operate and what we felt the disadvantages are of splitting the operation or moving the whole operation to two fairgrounds. And they came back with a conceptual plan that left the operations at 1 Milestone Road and the administration at two fairgrounds, and that doesn't work for us. And it doesn't work for the ratepayer. It doesn't work for the interaction between our operation and administration. It's like this every day. I mean, it is back and forth work orders. Customers come in, pay their bill, and they need to talk to somebody about their water service, or they saw on the news lead in the water, Flint, Michigan. Every day. And so try to provide the best service we can to the customer, and having operations and administration split would not be efficient. And so we gave it due consideration. We listened to the consultants, met with them several times. They gave a conceptual plan, and it's not uncommon for someone to come in for a deduct meter and Andrea to walk out into the stockroom and grab the materials. And that's rather than, sorry, you've got to go across the street and hope someone's there. So, gave it due consideration. I can look right in the mirror and say we gave it an honest look.
Yeah. Do you recall what the reasoning for leaving operations on that site?
I'm sorry, Chris.
Do you recall what the reasoning was for them to recommend leaving operations over where it currently is? Why?
Well, because operations is a six-bay garage with a small workspace, mechanical room, and a stock room. So that would have to be moved over, and I just think ran out of space. I'm not sure. We didn't get to that point. They never designed or placed the operations over here because they listened to us and a little bit, and they left the operations at 1 Milestone. That's where the pipe yard is. That's where all down at Wires Valley Station is the center for our SCADA system. It's a center for everything. All the data comes into that processor, and then we access it remotely. Could that be moved? I guess it could be, but we're just investing a lot of money in the Wires Valley Station. That'll be done here by April 1st, and that would not be, I think, responsible to move it now.
Is there any improvements to the operations building, or is this strictly admin?
Strictly administration. I mean, the floor plan, everyone is in there. You know, our operations is, I'd say it's not, you can't say, this is administration, this is operation. Andrea does process most of our payments and deals with customers. But at the same time, she also is out getting materials if someone comes in for a deduct meter and explaining how all that works. So we're all in there. We're all in there. Our meter tech will be in there. It's set up so that we have an efficient workspace that will really serve our needs for the next 50 years, we believe.
Two of the three members that are not here had emailed me, and just they had commented on the 40%, which you think might be more like 70. And it's hard to approve something at that
Well,
amount.
exactly,
And
and that's where we're coming from. We had the construction estimator used a Nantucket factor of 40% in his stick-built estimated. That's, this firm does. All they do is, not all they do, but they do all the construction estimate for the architectural firm we use. Pick a number, it's a guesstimate, that's a spread of that 4.7 to 5.5, that spread. So we weren't comfortable with guesstimates. We weren't comfortable with the 40% given what's been happening on Nantucket School, the fire station, C Street pump station. It just seems like everything with, the estimators couldn't get it right. They weren't using the right factor. So at that point, after we went to the modular panelized approach, when during our discussion with J.K. Scanlon, who's done a lot of work here, he said, if I were stick building this, you should use a 70% Nantucket factor. That was what his comment was. So we just weren't comfortable with estimates or guesstimates. We have real numbers, not a bid, but the next best thing to a bid, because done under the RFP process and under Chapter 149 modular construction, we have a number. That's the number. No more opening the bids and going, we got none of that. We didn't want to go down that road. There was too big a spread. Didn't want it, guesstimates.
Yeah. When do you foresee a major overhaul with the operations side of Mount Comet? Is that?
No, I'm not thinking of a
If
major overhaul.
if in 5 years you come back and it's.
I'm not thinking of major overhaul, but certainly the skills that are required now are different than the skills of 40 years ago. With pick and shovel the keyboard, handheld, smartphone, that kind of. So, this building will allow us to provide training, the regulations you mentioned. We just found out 3 months ago that we've got to change our classification. DEP has reclassified us as a larger system. Well, that means that everyone needs a new license. We have a temporary operating certificate to allow us to take the exams to get those. Now, those requirements are 12-week course before you can take any exam now. We applied to the state. Mark Willett, who's our engineer, has a waiver from taking the class because of his education and experience. No one else can get that. So this building will, as we go down the road and people need different skills, we'll be able to do training right in this building. And the world is going to webinars, that kind of training on remote training. That's the way the world is going, because even though the class was being offered at Cape Cod Community, it's 5:30 to 9:30 at night. So you're going over there, staying overnight, coming back. But the floor plan of this building has workstations for our operations people. They are on the computer. I mean, they're programming meters. They're looking at SCADA. It's using an iPad. Just the way the workforce is going today.
Jim?
Just because I wasn't on the committee before, but this project has, you said, has gone through the capital, this committee.
Yep.
And so you've already done your due diligence, I assume, in a previous year.
That was before any of us were on the committee.
Yeah.
So, yes, but no.
But I mean, it did get approved by a group that analyzed it.
Yes, and the capital program committee at the time when this was first we first put this concept together, this plan together, the capital program committee at the time came and toured. The chairman and one other member came and went through our building and then reported back. And that started the ball rolling, ending up in the approval of the 2015 town meeting.
And just a couple comments, I mean, just to lay it on the table. You know, there've been lots of, you know, everybody understands the kind of the boundaries and jurisdictions of the Water Commission, and we're all respectful of that. But there've been, like you said, conversations about centralizing. I've heard people say, well, perhaps we should, you know, save that land for some other future use. But I'm not sure if that's the jurisdiction of this committee to think about those things. I don't know. But as I'm sitting here and just the juxtaposition of the C Street request for additional money next to this, what I think I heard from David was we had a good bid. It was under budget. We have an opportunity to do some other things that didn't fit under the bid, and we've got money in the retained earnings to do it. And I hear a similar argument here from the water company, which was we had a bid, it's come in over, and we've got the retained earnings to do it. So it seems to be, at least from that, maybe that's too global, but they seem to be kind of parallel conversations, which, and I think that was just a comment.
Yep.
Just
That's kind of we're acting about, you know, I think that's a similar process. I mean, I think the water companies,
a comment about the property, just that right now, as we speak, by April 15th of this year, that project will be done, but there were 79 shallow wells down there on the vacuum system, one of 2 or 3 left in the state. An operational nightmare. You get a vacuum leak, you're done. And we have replaced those with 2 gravel packed wells that are 40 feet deeper into that upper aquifer for more protection, greater recharge. But doing that increased the zone 1 area of protection bound. So it's pretty safe to say that the land from where you go down out of the driveway down into Wyers Valley is off limits from here on, just from the water supply point of view. It's not, if we wanted to build anything down there, not going to happen. It's just, we reach at the end. It's just not going to happen.
that's good to know.
So we just think we've worked hard, we've done our homework, we've got a firm number, and we have resources in our certified retained earnings that have grown and that we feel are an appropriate, the commission feels is an appropriate use to complete this project, and we ask for your support.
Libby, can I have a question? Where in the planning is 2 fairgrounds, and what is the proposed date of, say, development? If do we even know that?
Nope, it's
No.
not on the schedule.
Okay.
The selectmen have not taken it up again, I think probably because we've been consumed with other things like the
Sure.
Island Home and the fire station. But their most recent vote, not with the current board, was in June of 2015, I believe, to move towards constructing a municipal office building at 2 fairgrounds with the offices from downtown to move out there. But it hasn't really been taken up since, and again, other stuff.
Got it.
Actually, the current board decided in May not to proceed with that project and to focus on the island home and the sewer, Nantucket sewer, just because for all the reasons that, you know, Libby said.
Sure.
And just really defer it to a, you know, undesignated date.
All right. So no date. Peter,
Question. In regards to your retained earnings right now, you said you have about 2.6 million balance, and what would you say like annual or 5-year average is allocated to retained earnings from, operations or from year-end cash flow?
In my, right off the top of my head here, we've had one allocation out of retained earnings in the last 5 years of a couple $100,000.
Out of it, what about annually into it?
In the past, it's, I think, Ryan, help me here, I think.
I mean,
I don't
Darth
know.
though, is it $1 million a year, or is it
Probably
80,000 a year?
Probably average. It's average more than that. I mean, if you remember, certified retained earnings is a, I won't say complex calculation, but it's not as simple as just excess revenue over expenditures. But probably the average balance in retained earnings for the last 5 years probably been 1.8 million or something in that, or 2 million or something in that range.
Okay. And it doesn't, I mean, you never worry about, you take 1.6 out this year and then, for whatever reason you see another
That would
500,000.
still leave about 8, 9.
Yeah,
leave about
and that's a
eight-
good
about
solid
1.1
buffer,
million, which is
historically speaking.
what's your revenue budget?
1.1 million.
Okay.
How much? So that's over 10%
Yeah.
retained earnings, which is far in excess of the policies that we maintain for reserves. So
Mhm.
that would be still sufficient, even taking the 1.5 out.
Okay.
Historically, the commission has used retained earnings for large projects like the Washington Pond tank was built with retained earnings.
Build it up and then use it, when you need to.
So you don't have to borrow depending on, you look at rates, you consult with the finance department.
What makes more sense financially?
Right now, rates are pretty good, but I think they're starting to go up a little bit.
Mhm.
But we're ready now, and we have the funding available, no impact to the rate base.
You knew my hand was gonna come up.
Peter. I'm going to take off, Jim, from what you said globally. I think globally, each of us, each of our committees, this committee, the commissioners, yourselves, our management, FinCom, all have a fiduciary responsibility. Just my layperson's perspective, should we be grabbing that much retained earnings from water on an annual basis and then using it to finance a building that's gone from 3.5 to close to 6? Should we? Should we keep retained earnings for what I call more constructive construction projects like a water main blowout or tank having a leak or other monies? I think to spend close to $1,000 a square foot for what would be probably one of the most expensive buildings that we own and operate for 11 or 13 employees, whichever we want to focus on, to me is just not responsible. I think it's irresponsible from a fiduciary standpoint, at least my perspective. And I don't look for people to support that or refute it. It's just my opinion. Looking at the site plan, we have 30 plus parking spaces. I mean, there must be a lot of people who go down to the water department on a daily basis if we have 13 people who have cars, employees. That's double. I just think that I would be willing to, whether it's here or Finance Committee, to make a motion to stick to your 3.5 million. I would look at super value engineering, your existing plant or what you have on paper. I know this committee was not together in 2015. I would look at putting monies towards renovation of a new building. In my eyes, 37-year-old building is not old by any imagination. I could not support this because globally, at least where I'm coming from FinCom or Capcom, I look at all the town requests, not just fiefdoms or individual departments on an individual basis, because you cannot operate that way. And I look at the prioritization of spending that sort of money for an admin building is low on the totem pole if I look at a DPW building that has millions of dollars for the mechanized equipment sitting out in the rain or sitting out in the snow. I think that's also unwise, but I understand we need that. So, once again, just my perspective,
I would not support that use of retained earnings. I know if I were making that decision, I know we don't make that decision, and I appreciate that. But I just think it is ratepayer money. So to go back to what your question was, Christie, in my mind, a ratepayer is in a sense put money to retained earnings based on the price per gallon of water usage. So it's hard for any of us to think not. So it's almost a prepayment. And that's a methodology on setting a budget, whether you inflate your expense and say we're keeping our rates the same, or you change your rate and lower your expense. We have that opportunity, anyone who does a budget, which is a guidance. And I know towns have different methodologies in setting budgets and what we can do and can't do based on rules and regs. But I also think a return on investment of close to what I think is 20% tells me that either our budget is inflated with expense that we don't use to net income, that's what I look at it as, net income, and maybe there should be a reduction in rates. So I think we all have to look at ourselves and say, maybe just the water bill, and maybe our lowest utility bill that we pay on a monthly basis, but I can think of better places for that to go structurally within the water system than a building that's close to $1,000 a square.
Hey, Jim.
So, just one of the reason I made the comment about should we be, I guess, globally looking at keeping that property for some future use. I was just trying to get on the table things that people are talking about in the community that, I'll be honest with you, that are the elephant in the room. We haven't brought those out. I just thought it was important that we talk about them. We can debate here if we want, and perhaps need to, the pros and cons of centralizing versus decentralizing. I'd be happy to have that debate because there's a lot of evidence on both sides of that in terms of having having the administrative building be part of some future, although that's a big perhaps, development of an office building on the two fairground site. And I personally, if this committee decides to, you could go back and ask the water company to resubmit everything and again, go through the proposal. That's why I asked the question. Has that happened? And it has, albeit with a former committee. But it also was approved by the finance committee, which was a former finance committee. And so I'm just trying to. We can debate as I said, we can debate if you want to and go through the process again. But I think we should respect the effort that's been done by boards and committees in the past.
And I respect that, Jim. I think you or I would miss the point if we're not focusing on 3.5 million or some number north. So the approval was based on a number that was far less than what we're talking about now.
So long as I've been on the Board of Selectmen, I can't think of a project that hasn't come in significantly higher. And we just saw it with C Street. We've seen it with the fire station, which went back and got additional money and then now needs more, perhaps more. We've seen it with the school having to come back with additional money, and people didn't debate people did not approve the project because the cost per square foot went up. So
In what, I'll ask you a question, and what happened with those projects when they came for the first time to any committee? What happened? What was mentioned to them when they came in with the fire station? How many go-arounds is their building? How many value engineerings?
Right.
I just think that this is the first time that we've seen a building.
Well, not this committee. I mean, the Capital Program Committee has seen a building.
When were the drawings completed? When were the design drawings completed? The ones you provided us?
Went to HGC in August.
So it was the first time a building was actually approved, and then you got a number. So this is the first time that a building and a number has been brought to either FinCom or Capcom, Jim, right?
Well, you had estimates that went to the.
We had
FinCom.
certainly had the estimates from the the
And the
architect, the
results of
all that.
The results of that
Yeah.
made them, led them to move to a different conclusion, so.
So is, Peter, is your point that this is the point where we're seeing these overages that weren't sort of
Well, I think
considered
you
when
can't,
tasking these?
when you base a budget on an estimate that doesn't have a building or design developed, for a design developed drawing, you might as well pick a square and say it's gonna cost this much money. But now we have something, we have a program, we have a set of building plans that you have now bids to bid on, and they bidded it, and they opened the bids, and they found out, oh boy, we're not where we thought, we're where we are, and I don't think, unless you can tell me, has there been any value engineering of this building to value it down, to engineer it so the costs go down? And I think the disparity in the percentage, Jim, of this building in comparison to others is higher percentage-wise on over than the fire station. So I think, yes, you can compare one's over, or David's price is over by 500,000 on a $5 million project, but this is close to 40%. So, and I think, once again, it's just me, to spend $1,000 on a square foot building for admin, I'll be professional, is wrong.
I appreciate your comments, and I would love to have a global discussion about rates and all of that. That's I've been doing for 45 years, not much longer. But I can tell you that I firmly believe in the last 22 years, Wanacomment has put into its system close to $30 million in infrastructure, pipe, tanks, pumps, wells, all to support this economy. Because if we didn't do that, if the commission didn't do that, if we didn't have that plan, we wouldn't be sitting here now. There wouldn't be a new school. There wouldn't be a need for a fire station. We are a significant player in the economy and the health of this community. That's undeniable. Now, we're doing a water project now. We allocated $1.5 million for that. In this 10-year plan going out at the end of 2026, 99% of the water mains in our system will have been replaced. There'll be no more 1890 pipe. There'll be no more lead services. There won't be a fire hydrant over 20 years old. All that has been planned, and the impact on the rate has been fairly minimal. Have we had rate increases? Certainly, but that's responsible. I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, but there are a lot of systems in this state that pride themselves on not spending a dime on the system. Yeah, well, how responsible is that? So we have put significant resources, and the building that provides the type of facility that we're proposing is just as important to the operation of the water company as a good pipe for the water to go through. Just as important. You know, $1.5 million into meters. The state was amazed Friday. They'd never seen a system that would. We showed them an alarm sheet. Okay, this is all your. This is one of our customers who had 800,000 gallons go through his meter because of a leak. Those kinds of things are the commitment that we made to the system that the commission had. And rates, in our new budget, there's a rate study. The town manager has asked us to consider, would we do a joint rate study to look at water and sewer? Absolutely. Is there a different rate structure? There may be. Should there be a different rate for irrigation? Should there be a different rate for people over 65? I personally think there should be. but, on fixed income, life, all of these things need to be looked at as a community. And we are wide open to doing that. But to wait, I think is not responsible. Till the building falls down, is that what we're gonna do? Are we gonna wait for the town, who, with all due respect, takes a long time to make a decision on buildings and fits and starts, and we're not. We have a responsibility, and I think this will take up. And Peter, you and I won't agree on this, but
Well, no, Bob, I agree with the track record of Juan McCommon when it's done. That's not our debate. Our question is one question. What do we think about the use or that 1.5 million going into fund the project, period? That's it. And that's it.
So can you answer the question on the value engineering you've done to reach the number you've got to demonstrate that you've gone through
we have started.
and downsized and, you know,
We've ended up at this 4,700 square foot building after numerous meetings, and it was bigger to begin with. It was about 5,200. It had a full basement. We took the basement out. Became a little problematic with the mechanical room, so we put 325 square feet under it. And we arrived at this design. Can the site work be changed? Sure. I mean, but the $1,000 a square foot, it's soup to nuts. If you took the building estimate from J.K. Scanlon out, it's like $735.
and that's
So-
the construction.
Yeah.
What's your construction cost per square foot? So
You add all the stuff
No, I
that goes
understand.
in it, the site
Yeah.
work. That's right, the total project is right around $1,000 a square foot for it. Can that be reduced? Sure. Can we take advantage of paving costs under the town contract? Sure. We're not, if we can build this for less than the $5 million, we're gonna build it for less than $5 million. We apply the same review to this as we have as with our pipe project, We're able to get that down from what we thought would be 1.5 to $1 million. Let me tell you, pipe's a lot easier to estimate than a building. It's significantly easier to estimate.
So what do your estimators project the price escalation for construction if you wait a year and come back and redo it and go through the whole process again?
Our architectural firm
Architects.
was looking at 2 to 5%, but we quite honestly never talked with that with Scanlon. We said, look, this is the price you're going to hold it.
No, I understand.
It's not, their comment to us was, the 40% isn't wrong, it's closer to 70, and we don't see anything changing in the next 2 or 3 years. So they didn't give us a percentage, but I think we can assume it's not gonna be less.
Yeah. When, Bob, when the hospital was looking at the property to develop, what considerations did they have with where they couldn't build? I think you had mentioned one thing there, but what considerations over there would allow something not to go in where something is, whether it's a pump or
When the
a...
hospital came and talked to the commission about going into Wyers Valley, the zone of protection was 250 feet, not 400. So that gave some flexibility. We looked at putting an additional well in the back of the property instead of the 2. Maybe we were looking at a major reconfiguration, but the key was the 250 foot well, and the hospital was going to pay to move everything out of the way up to Pulpus Road. So all kinds of issues related with that, and it didn't happen. So once that didn't happen, we went back to work. Getting rid of getting the state to agree that we could get rid of the 79 tubular wells and increase the Zone 1 protection to 400 feet and not have to go through a new source permit was huge. I can tell you that to get the well at North Pasture was almost 9 years from start to finish, of which 8.3 years was permitted. So when we made that trade-off, we give that, the state agreed. If you go 400 feet, you can put 2 wells in, no new source. That allowed us, then we reconfigured the property. That is the kind of long-term investment in water supply issue that's.
So that precludes doing anything a la the hospital for the future?
That from anyone, that
For
includes
anyone.
from us. We can't go in there. They let us keep, they agreed to keep the storage sheds that are there now. But other than that, you're not gonna build it there. That is water supply.
Right.
Uh,
Well, I'm at a few places here. I'm kind of torn. Initially, for a long time, I was always on the thought of it makes sense for the water company to move over to the complex. I'm starting to think more that the complex that has currently no plans as of yet doesn't have to be just exactly on that same footprint of land, meaning we're talking across the street. That could, to me, that sort of is, we're not talking about the water company being out in Tom Nevers right now. It's literally right across the street. I'm sort of accepting that a little bit more. You know, in the last 12 years or so that I was on the Finance Committee, the Water Commission has always been responsible. The water company's always been responsible. And, you know, there was always comments that how thorough your reports were, made sense. So I think you guys are always responsible, and I think you guys take the responsible approach to do things. Yeah. I think that, you know, this is a means to an end for, you know, this is something we could say, this building's done with it. We don't have to consider it in 10 years or 13 years with a complex. You know, when I see that there might be a consideration for a water company wing, I get a little concerned that at that point, we're looking at maybe 4 times the cost, probably more, and there probably will be a rate increase because of that.
I'm suspecting that we wouldn't be over there for free.
Yeah. So I'm more in tune with your presentation. I think I'm accepting it a little bit more than I was previously. The fact that we can get this completed sooner than later and not have to consider it for another 50, 60 years, to me is desirable, and have one less thing we have to worry about with a complex. That's my 2 cents. I am concerned with the percent. If there's anything we could do to sort of, do we have any say on the 40%? And the 70% you said was based on?
Well, the 40% was the estimate, the numbers that the construction estimate was using. The 7, and Scanlon's in their conversation said he used 70, he should have used 70. 40, he should have used 70. But that was all relative to stick-built, and we said, you know, at that meeting, we'd gone back and forth, and finally, quite honestly, I'd had enough, and just said, we're done. Modular, panelized construction, that's it. Forget the stick-built. That's what we're going to the commission with. That's the path we're going down. And no one threw me out of the room, so that's the way we went.
Got it. So anyway, that's where I'm at. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, first of all, I apologize as to members of the public. I was originally unable to be here at 8, and I went ahead and forwarded thoughts to our work group in advance and to town administration, but I was able to cut my appointment short and be here. I do think that it's important to thank Bob and the commissioners for the work you've done putting this together and the due diligence that you put into the project as it was originally proposed. I do have a contrary position, but I want to state that up front. You know, I understand things change. I'm just going to take some briefs from my email, but this is a significant increase relative to the goals of the project at that location. It's a 1.5 million increase, which is a minimum increase. There's construction overages. There's other potential issues that might come up, so we're looking at 1.5 million minimum. And despite this, this is an increase that's being paid from reserves, but those reserves are Wanacoma customer fees, and the service is one that's really serves the public need, the community need, and I believe that an increase of this magnitude, it ought to percolate within the community, within the ratepayers, within the taxpayers. And I'm not suggesting that this be something that we review for 2 or 3 years. I'm not suggesting that necessarily it waits for any determination from the selectmen on whether they want to get moving on the Fairgrounds 2 complex. I know the sewers, you know, they worked long and hard on the sewer that failed at the ballot box. Maybe it's time to focus on things that would help to serve administrative services, one-stop shopping for people who go in there. I've been to that building quite a bit for my own work, and it's busy. I do think that there is some validity to having the facilities shared, not only in terms of a footprint, but in terms of cost. You've got the one-stop shopping aspect of it, and then you've got the cost aspect of it. Nothing is free. You know, yes, you would be required to, you know, commit funds, but in fact, that would serve the town. If we're doing construction at one location, that's larger construction. I got to stop there for a second. None of this is to suggest that there's any, certainly not on my part, and it's nothing I would support, is that there's, in terms of centralizing the facilities, that there's some necessity, need, or attractiveness to centralized administration. The Wanacoma is an enterprise account. It's its own company. So when I'm speaking, I just want to be very clear. When I'm speaking about centralizing facility, I'm not talking about necessarily centralizing your personnel and your staff. You have those people in place. There's to a large extent, it's a very, it's clearly a specialized skill set, a lot of what goes on there, and that would continue. But back to the costs, there would be so there's the one-stop shopping aspect, which is very appealing to me. Right now, you go downtown, and this is relative to, I'm not going to diverge on this for long, but it is relevant, so I'm going to mention it. If you need to get a permit, in some instances, you need to go to the assessor's office downtown, you need to go, then you go to the building permit, then you go to Wanacoma, you have to go to the DPW. Is it worth, $15 million for a facility on 2 Fairgrounds Road? Probably not. But are there other savings? And the fact that the 2 Fairgrounds Road is in tremendously worse condition than, for instance, your building or the DPW building? Yeah, I think those are things that need to be taken into consideration. So all of that relates back to the cost, and the cost is that one of the costs that would be one of the ways of addressing the cost is, instead of putting what was previously $3.5 million and is now $4.7 million into a facility at one milestone, contributing a good portion of that to a facility with all the same programmatic matters addressed for you at 2 Fairgrounds. It's a 20-acre site or something like that at 2 Fairgrounds. It's not. There's plenty of room there. So the point on that is, I believe, and I'm also supporting members who are not here, who are not able to attend, who asked me to speak on this, and they believe, and people I've spoken to in the community believe, that it's not the end of the world to take 6 months and actually focus on that topic with a work group. There's not currently a building on this island that has or will be built that hasn't undergone a work group process. Some are just a building committee, some are looking at other aspects of it. I believe that, and I think it's a common theme in some of the discussions we've had here at this work group, our committee in charge of making recommendations on capital, that we bring a little bit of planning into the process. It's not our job to plan for the town, it's not our purview, I'm not suggesting that, but it is relevant to our making decisions for 10, 15, 20, 30-year capital expenditures. And again, I don't not support this project in terms of the intent, but I do have concerns about the location. I think that the 1.5 million recharacterizes this project, in my mind, certainly. Increase, a minimum 1.5 million, recharacterizes this project because in part it's such a dramatic increase. In part, this was previously reviewed and recommended by a completely different capital committee. I don't know that any one of us sat on that committee. Did we? No. Okay, so I think that there's merit in reviewing it. I'm not saying that it be reviewed on a 2-year process. My recommendation would be, as I stated in my email, that this be we would recommend this for an out year, being next year, and we would ask the town admin, it's not our role to request, but ask them to see if it's possible through the Board of Selectmen to fast track a work group that would look at the issues that are involved and report back to Capcom so we could make a recommendation in concert with whatever you bring back. I have a couple other quick comments on this. Actually, you know what? Other than the fact that, I did say this building isn't falling down, or I meant to, I'm not trying to belittle the maintenance or the conditions or any, I know you work in these conditions. Just like town admin works in this old office downtown, and the Plus staff works in what used to be, the Nantucket Electric building, which has been repurposed. They have walls that don't even go to the ceiling. You can't have a private conversation in there, like an executive session type planning conversation, and actually have it be private.
We feel that pain.
Yeah, and I think that the town, we happen to be in a position, I think we need to be careful. I think we need to leverage the value of every dollar we spend. And I think this review is an opportunity, would be an opportunity to leverage those dollars so that we could leverage the dollars you're investing in this building, perhaps, into helping the rest of the town leverage dollars so that these matters, just like for you, can be addressed for other administrative staff. That's how I feel. I'm not asking for anyone here support. I'm not asking for your opinion. I just simply wanted to state it. I had an opportunity to speak to some other members, the 2 members who weren't here. The 40% to 70% upcharge on the Nantucket cost is not the Watercommon's doing. Yours.
We put that word aside. We're not even considering that.
Yeah. Well,
we have bids now.
More to the point is the 40 to 70% upcharge for Nantucket service capital projects is built into any bid. And there are members of the group who may be here now, and certainly who are not here, who feel that there is a flawed process. Maybe it's a flawed process at the state level. If it's at the state level, then we need to deal with it. We've been building these facilities for these inflated dollar amounts. We're talking about, how many square feet is this?
It is 4,700 square feet.
And we're talking about $1,000 a square foot to construct primarily office space. This isn't medical facility space that would need certain types of certifications for in-wall gas, medical gas, and so on and so forth. And again, Bob, this has nothing to do, and to the commissioners here, this has nothing to do with you, but it is relevant to us making decisions. And if there's a process that's flawed and we can't address it here, then one of the things I'm going to recommend in our work group is that we address it we petitioned the Board of Selectmen to address it at the state level through home rule with regards to procurement. Enough is enough. We're spending too much money without getting the value on the dollar that you would get if you lived on the Cape. That's a separate matter, but it relates to this. The point is that we can leverage the value of these dollars through, I believe, reviewing this. And that building is not in a condition, it's not as imperative as perhaps this work at C Street, which I personally have issues with the way that is being handled. Again, it has nothing to do with the staff. But looking at a $3 million appropriation allocation, a $3 million allocation, and now a $500,000. But on this topic, the work, it's imperative. Without the C Street pump station, the town goes down, literally. This building, the town isn't going to fail because the Wanacoma Water Company building isn't started in June or September. If it starts if we come to the conclusion that what you've proposed is the best thing, at worst, because you have money in reserve, and you already have an appropriation of $3.5 million approved for your original project, this could start after the recommendation is made, correct?
Well, theoretically, no, because if the 1.5 million is not allocated, then I can't, myself or the assistant town accountant cannot sign off on a contract to construct a building for which we do not have all the available funding for.
Okay, so worst case.
So we couldn't do it.
Okay, thank you. So worst case scenario, this could begin, the shovels could be done next April. And in terms of these contracts being held at the prices they're being held at, I have to think, I've heard that on other projects that have been before us. This Nantucket upcharge of 70%, 40% that's built into the bids, it's there. We need to negotiate harder. That's not on you, Bob. That's on the town.
You cannot negotiate the price.
Then we need to work to change the law as pertains to Nantucket with the state. But as pertains to this project, which is what is on the table before us, it's an increase of $1.5 million or more, which I believe is a recharacterization of the project. I believe that as such, it's a new project, it's a new proposal, it's a new capital committee. I believe it should be reviewed. We should be weighing what is the best way to spend, recommend the expenditure of the reserve of the ratepayers, because this is not just for the ratepayers, this is for the community. This services the whole community. And I want to close with one thing. I understand that you have put, well, let me just say this. I said this to my committee in my email, and I mean this, and I've said this to you before in public and over the years in private. None of my comments are intended to take away from the good work and services Wanacoma has provided our community or the professional oversight you, Bob, personally, or the water commissioners have steadfastly contributed. And I believe that. This is nothing personal, and this is nothing about Wanacoma. This, for me, is about how we, as committee members, affect due diligence in the money that we're responsible for, which is other people's money. And that's all I can really contribute.
Jim and Bob?
Mr. Chairman, we spent about over an hour discussing this. I think now we've now beginning to hear the same comments once or twice or three times. So I'd like to move along, and I would like to make a motion that this committee support the request of the water company to take $1.5 million from their retained earnings to supplement their capital request.
All right, there's a motion on the table. Is there a second? I'll second it. Any discussion? Bob, did you want to make a comment?
I appreciate your comments. I do. I think we're not going to change anything at the state level. We're 2 years trying to get a simple merger between Sconset and us in the state level. But we're building this building under the cheapest provision of Chapter 149 of Modular Construction. This is my thoughts now. You know, I'm at the end of the road here, but the Water Commission, over the years, has provided a lot for this community, money and time. This community, if you're not a ratepayer, you're not supporting financially Wanacoma. You have a fire hydrant in front of your house that the ratepayer paid to put there, but you're on your well, you take advantage of the reduction in your house insurance. You don't pay a darn. When the town was short of money, and this is near and dear to me, when the town needed money, when we built the tanks, because the communications building out at Nantucket and Neil Point was falling down. And Charlie Gibson said, is there anything you can do to help us? And we did. We accrued $500,000 in that contract to be able to provide a place for the town to have a communication system that everyone benefits. Who would not want to do that? But the ratepayer paid that. The taxpayer didn't pay that. The ratepayer. Our responsibility is to the ratepayer. And we have put enough capital into the system to be able to support all that. As I said earlier, I'm skeptical of work groups. I look at the island home situation and I cringe. How many work groups on the island home? How many? We can't tread water anymore. We study things to death. Our work group was everyone that works at Wanacoma, water commissioners, an OPM and an architect. And this is where we're at. We feel that we have been more than financially responsible over the years to the ratepayer and to the taxpayer, whether they knew it or not. We took those tanks up, the insurance rating for this whole island dropped 20%. I didn't see the taxpayer pay any of that. The ratepayer did. Water Commission, by statute, by legislation, is responsible for the assets of Wanacoma. And in our combined best decision, this is where we feel we're at. Not wait a year, not wait 2 years. I would invite anyone to come tour the building. It's great. We just had Terminex take 5 dead rats out. So I would argue that our building is not much better, maybe even than 2 fairgrounds or the DPW building. But that's a whole nother, that's why we started a project to begin with. I'm done on my soapbox.
All right,
Chris, I'd like to respond to that.
sure.
I think that, I understand Bob's trying to move this ball forward for the project, and I don't have an issue with that, but I think I need to be clear on a couple things. There's a differentiation, the differentiation between the ratepayer, versus the taxpayer is in my mind kind of a wash as to expenditures, because there's plenty of folks around the island who pay into the system and they don't get anything out of it. Just like the ratepayers may pay, for instance, snow removal and road repairs. So you're saying, well, the ratepayers are paying for this, and someone who's a taxpayer gets a fire hydrant in front of their home, so that's a service. Yes, that's correct. But there's plenty of people who pay into the overall system who don't get services back. But that's not a reason for building a building. Rats in a facility are a maintenance issue, not a structural issue. So that, to me, isn't a reason to be building a building. And finally, I'm on the new Our Island Home Work Group, and I am a participating member of the Our Island Home Work Group, and I think it's unfair to equate this project to that project. There's a tremendous level of emotion and various other issues, including a dramatically larger cost. And various other intricacies involved in that, not to mention the way in which it was launched without public consensus. But, so I don't think it's fair to equate that project and work groups and planning times with this project. You might want to equate, though, that it was called on the floor of town meeting and shot down for a work group because there wasn't consensus behind it. And that's what I would suggest you take away from that type of a work group, or that type of not having a work group, as relates to Island Home. So those are my comments in response.
Stephen, I just want to mention, before you got here, there was question was raised about the two fairgrounds facility concept, and it is.
Did that come up?
It did. It is.
Okay.
It is. There is no consideration for. It is strictly a concept for the future at this point.
Okay.
There is no set plan. I don't. It's. They have no idea what it's going to look like at this point.
Okay.
Just so you know, that was something that came up a little while ago.
That's not what we were debating, Christie. But
No, I know, but it was, he had brought
So
up.
that's what Jim was referring to when he said things were being repeated?
No, I think, no, I was just bringing it up because your initial comment was talking about this facility, at the facility at 2 Fairgrounds Road and how that was gonna look. I just wanted to relay that was,
It was brought up.
it was brought up and it
Thank
was,
you.
We asked town administration, strictly a concept.
Okay.
There's nothing in the plans. Board of Selectmen have sidled it for the more pressing building projects.
Everything's a concept until you start banging on the door and make it happen. Okay, thank you for mentioning
Yeah.
that.
So there's a motion on the table to approve the water company's request, and there was a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? All right, we have it here. Okay. So let's see here. The day of the next meeting is to be determined. I think it's just internal. I know Richard's away. Nat, he just has a tough time with the second Wednesday of each month. Richard's away till mid-March. Are you away till mid-March?
I'm gonna be, I got a couple things going on, personal things going on, so I would go with Richard's date, so after mid-March would be good for me too.
I think it's good to have everybody here.
Yeah, same.
If that's okay with you
We have
guys.
to move a Wednesday.
Yeah. I did miss an item, item 4.
Oh, yes,
President's Board
yes,
of Selectmen. Any idea when they want that? Initially,
No, it's
I wanted to, what? Well, go ahead.
The board, a member of the board, about a few weeks ago, asked, gee, we'd like to hear the thinking or the thoughts of the report from the Capcom committee that they gave to the finance committee, just so the board can be aware of the projects.
Fair enough.
And everybody agreed, and so I brought that to Christie to say, would you be willing to do that? And that's why it's on the agenda to ask, would you be willing to do it? And if you are, then you and I can work on the dates to do it. And so,
Has the Board of Selectmen gotten any reports of any sort? Nothing?
okay, what do you mean?
Capital reports at all? Yeah.
I
Capital
don't
committee.
know if they've been, I don't know.
Well,
I don't believe so, no.
okay.
So I think it'd be nice if you were willing to come. and-
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So if this group agrees, then.
I probably prefer the process of giving them the report and then
Okay.
having them ask questions and just
All right,
giving a little
okay.
intro.
So I can send that out.
Yeah. Stephen, is your comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I happen to be watching that selectmen's meeting. I'm not running for office, and we want to be clear. But I've been watching the meetings, and it made me, look back at our newly minted policies and procedures that were approved by the Board of Selectmen for our group in order for bonding and other requirements to be met. And one of those requirements is that our recommendation be presented to the Board of Selectmen. And it hasn't been. And I have some concern about that because what was presented included things we either voted not to include in terms of the dollars allocated. For instance, Jim voted, I believe, not to sing loud, but I mean, just saying there were people who voted not to have a bucket truck, and there were people who voted for a bucket truck. Well, the bucket truck's in what the Board of Selectmen received.
Yeah.
We discussed a substantial reduction in the R. Allen home funding.
Yep.
That's in. And we discussed and agreed on a substantial reduction in the sidewalk improvement, only to the extent that there's money in there that's unspent. And we know that the town is, so from a good financial sense, we know it's not going to be spent immediately, and that the town is already committed to the project, and that we'll be replenishing that money at a later date. However, that money is back in. So, I just have to wonder, like,
If we
Is-
didn't
is
look,
there
if we
rubber on the
didn't,
stamp?
if we don't look at it.
why are we here?
Yeah.
Like, I'd rather just come in.
All the more reason to have Chris.
Yeah, the town can buy us a cup of coffee and we can sit here and rubber stamp it.
Yeah, I'm happy to point out, the difference between our report and what maybe the Board of Selectmen's getting.
So
Well, I was
would
disappointed,
assume-
Jim.
I would assume they would have been the same, and to the extent they're not.
I was disappointed,
I'll follow
and
up with-
I'm not making a political statement,
Oh,
but I was disappointed that you, as a member of this committee, didn't pick that up, because, I mean, I think that that's important. And I'm not, it's nothing personal, I'm just saying, I look to our leadership. Please let me finish, and I'll let you
I
rebut.
don't have any comment when you make a personal,
I'm not,
comment personally.
Jim, you are our representative to the selectmen,
I'm
as the
Board of
selectmen.
Selectmen's representative.
You're a member of this committee, are you not?
So I've got a question.
You're a member of this, no, I'd like to get.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Let's see some light on this. If we have daylight between us, then I'd like to know about it. If we don't, then I'm just making a comment that I hope that it doesn't happen again, because it's important. All of us sit around here and we volunteer our time and our energy.
Yeah, I agree.
So all I was saying, Jim, I wasn't making it personal. I was just saying, you're a member of our committee, which you are by fact, and you're a member of the selectmen, and you go back to the selectmen as part of the task there. Each of them has a committee report. And I would just ask that if something comes up here that is in concert with a discussion that's being had there, that you would point out if there's a difference in what we recommended. And I don't think that that's unfair. And again, it's not personal. So please don't make it personal.
So has the Board of Selectmen had a briefing on our report to, like?
That's why they asked to have you come.
No,
Okay, so
but they've
then-
already approved the warrant.
Okay.
So it's gone out to warrant to the town without the benefit of their having the benefit of our input.
The finance committee, I believe, makes they make the motion. The board
So-
And those
puts
items
things,
will be duly noted.
puts things
Yeah,
on the
so-
article, but that's not the approval
Those
of
weren't,
the warrant.
those weren't altered at
Okay.
FinCom level, were they?
No, not at all.
The finance committee hasn't come out with
Or
their
else
report.
why did we
So
say
that's what the.
Right,
that's-
right.
And the
But-
board would like to hear independently from the finance committee, the report from Capcom, and that's what this is all about. This isn't about what Jim did or did not say back to that group.
Yeah, I understand that, and please
Okay.
don't make it about that. That's not what I was saying. I wasn't saying it was about what you
Well,
did or didn't say to the
well,
group.
I think the
What you
place,
said.
when I go, be happy to have your support then, Jim,
Yeah.
as being, that's what we had
Right.
discussed.
Yeah.
You know, that is the point to
This
where,
this
when
isn't
we are fully
controver-
discussing
this
the
isn't
capital
controversial.
report to the
Well-
Board of Selectmen, that is
Yeah.
when I would
Yeah.
want the support of our committee
I
members.
believe the policies and procedures indicate that it's supposed to occur on the timeline. So much like we provide the FinCom information before they meet with their department heads to discuss things, we provide the information to the Board of Selectmen. So not only is it relevant that we provide it, but it's relevant that we provide it timely for their consideration and deliberations. So that was part of my point, which I did not get to. The other point I want to make is I understand that town administration can make its own determinations freely.
Yep,
Absolutely.
yep, that's true.
And they represented to the selectmen what they represented to us at the initial request, minus some of the things that really weren't capital. However, where I have an issue with that, and I would look to our leadership to be interceding, because we made a recommendation, is that our chairman met with the chairman of the Board of Selectmen and the chairman of the Finance Committee and town administration and the finance director, and worked out how to, based on our recommendation, how to make it, how to have it all work. So what I drew from that was that there was consensus, a consensus view on our recommendation. However, what made it to the selectmen was not that consensus view, and which is fine, town admin and finance can do what they want, but at least then at the same time present what the capital committee did. Otherwise, why are we here?
Or let this committee know that we've altered the request, just so we know, because otherwise.
Something.
It fits, you know.
Something, that's all. I'm not,
The request doesn't, the request comes, we're waiting for your motion. You make the motion on capital.
Yes, but,
And you should make the motion.
Peter, you get what I'm saying here?
well, FinCom will take, now you specifically he's talking about the total capital budget, correct?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that has been provided to the FinCom. The
Yeah,
FinCom will make
right.
a
And you
motion
haven't
based
done it
on
yet.
those numbers.
So
That's
we don't know
correct.
what, you
We're
may not
there
like
yet.
anything we've done.
Yeah. But there are, if I can help, there are things, Stephen, that are very frustrating because this committee can say A, FinCom can agree with A, is the answer. Admin can say, nope, it's B. And then goes to the BOS, and then it goes on the warrant. It'll have the FinCom's stating, no, we thought it should be A, not what the.
Well, as it goes through the process, then
And
we
then
should
the
raise our
townspeople
hand
vote.
and say, let's do a reconciliation.
Well, that's the maybe that's
But-
the advantage to the capital committee presenting to the board of
Yeah,
selectmen.
and also,
is that
but
they
if
get
I,
their-
but right now, there's nothing on the table of the board.
Correct.
We have nothing on the table.
Would it-
well, that's not true. The board, you approved, subject to a finance committee recommendation, the board of selectmen have approved a budget and a capital budget. You've approved it. You voted on that.
We put it on the warrant, that's different. The board,
And we haven't,
that's not, putting it on the warrant, believe me, and those are things I had to learn. Putting it on the warrant doesn't mean
just
that,
housekeeping.
that's not the approval of the board. There are a lot of things that are on the warrant that when the motions come from the finance committee, the board will say yay or nay to.
So-
On a wide range of subjects.
So the board, so you're saying, so when are you saying the board actually votes on approving a budget?
So when we get the recommendation from FinCom, which I think is the 13th,
Yeah.
no, you're doing that the
We're
13th.
doing a lot of stuff on Monday, yes.
So when we get all the motions from the FinCom on all 100 and whatever articles, plus except the planning board, and then we have a meeting where we say yay or nay to either accept the recommendation, the finance committee motion, to not accept, or, which typically doesn't happen, I don't think, but I don't know. That's the first year I'm chairman, so we'll see. And then finally is sometimes the board of selectmen will make a comment. That's
So-
when it gets approved, that's the recommendation
So,
from the board of selectmen to town meeting.
So, yeah, go ahead.
so to the extent, I get where I was wrong there, and that makes sense, thank you. However, I do think it's important, it was brought up at the selectmen's meeting that we would come there and present what it is we're gonna be doing for the future versus our recommendation. I mean, you go back and look at the tapes, it's very obvious. So, I'm glad that our chairman, and I appreciate and support that our chairman and our board of selectmen committee member are gonna be coordinating our recommendation being presented in front of the selectmen.
There are recommendations. I can't recommend Libby's
There's a report.
recommendation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so one board or another, might be the board of selectmen has to determine if they're going to go with a capital report or an administration report.
We tend to rely on the FinCom in the past.
Right.
So that every board's different.
But a project specifically like we were speaking of this morning has just been approved by Capcom or recommended back to FinCom. And FinCom could accept that recommendation, or they could say, no, since we look at not only the capital, we look at the operational, they could say blow it up. It could be one or
And then
two
the
ways.
finance, the chairman of the board of selectmen.
The irony about this is that the Wanacoma could say, thank you, disagree, or agree with Capcom, disagree with FinCom, who cares about admin, we're gonna do it anyway.
Right. And then there's always town meeting.
Or they
That
could
can
go,
happen.
they could go on town meeting floor.
Yeah.
That can happen. We know that.
That's the
But-
town meeting form of government.
But the change in process, as I understand it, that increases or stabilizes,
Okay.
that stabilizes our bond rating, is that the Board of Selectmen is the elected decision-making body, gets an opportunity to review the capital committee, the finance committee, and the town administrator's recommendations, and then make a determination on what they want to vote. So I think that's great.
Jim, before you leave, one question. When is strategic to meet with the Board of Selectmen? Because I,
Before town meeting.
okay,
So, anyway,
maybe in 2, I'm away next week, maybe in 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
Maybe in
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Okay.
I'd love to get it over with.
Can I suggest that
Yeah.
since they're going to be, if there is some disparity or conflict between what we recommended and what FinCom recommends, which there could be, and since the finance director and town admin will probably be commenting on the finance committees when it's presented, that we would present ours then. So it's all in front of the selectmen at one time. It's not a week or 2 weeks later. It's all relevant and the
So
discussion
we'll
is
just,
occurring.
I'll have to balance that with the other items in the agenda. I understand it'd be.
Yeah,
it'd be your
I don't know. I'm
preference,
just saying.
Well,
But this is a really busy time between now and town meetings, so we got a lot going on. And,
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I would be happy to attend the Finance Committee meeting for when you review it, just to be there with for any questions, but I might be away when you guys are doing that.
So do you, but
Might
how do you
Peter do it?
communicate our action today on the water company to the finance committee? Because it was really for the finance committee that
I'll send the
asked us
chair
to
an
consider
email,
this.
you know.
Yeah, David is out of country even next week. Steve Morey, who was sitting here, is our number 2, so he was listening.
Okay.
You can make your recommendation. I know that
Yeah.
we at FinCom took it far greater level than what we heard this morning. So, we're all have our opinions.
Yeah, and you know
It's-
what's nice
it's-
about this group is we can walk away and
You
still
have
be
to.
friends.
Well, that's,
Yeah.
and even with altering one of our recommendations, bucket truck, we have to be able to just say, we've done our part,
Oh, yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I mean, I voted,
It's off the list, believe me.
it's in the budget that was on the,
That's not approval. Okay, we just went through that.
I understand that, John. But it's on the list of town meeting, and to people who just read the warrant, they don't understand the difference.
Yeah. But it won't be.
It's not a clarification with the
So
warrant.
any week, but next week you can do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll
I'll
leave
make
it
a
with you.
motion to adjourn.
Yeah, so I'm gonna send David an email, and I'll just CC you.
it's back in.
That's fine. Yeah, I mean,
Should I CC?
the committee's recommendation is to proceed. That's what should be supported from this committee to FinCom. As a single member of FinCom, I would be contrary to that, but that's
Sure.
that's
That's the
the great thing
process.
about our process.
Yep,
So you should say as such.
all right.
Okay. Is there anything else?
Yeah.
Correct.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion made.
Second? Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, you guys.